What up? All my scientists, my artists, my philosophers, my geneticists, my roboticists, my biologists, my archaeologists, my astronomers.
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
Let's
Do it
get
live.
Busy.
3,
This
2,
has been busy from the first.
1.
Sure.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Busy broadcasting from Osaka, Japan. I'm joined by my co-host, XJ. That's
Yo.
when you say hi. That was your cue. You missed your cue. You had one job. One job, XJ.
If only I had one job.
All I need is one job. One job.
I just thought of that thing, the old In Living Color bit with the Jamaicans, where they're like fighting over like who has like 15 to 17 jobs and who has more.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I forget that bit.
Yeah.
All I remember
they did it a bunch of times.
All I remember from I was just about to say SNL there. All I remember from In Living Color was Fire Marshal Bill and the gay movie critics.
Oh, you don't remember Homie the Clown?
Of course, Homie the Clown.
Oh, okay. All right. And and Handyman, of course.
Handyman, yeah. Yeah, vaguely.
Who's a very unpolitically correct character at this point.
Okay. What was the rub on that one? I don't understand. Handyman, I remember it.
He did like the mentally retarded. He's like, never underestimate the power of the handicapped. So he was like, he was conflating mental retardation and like just people who are generally handicapped.
Yeah, it was just like so disrespectful. Like it wouldn't gain any traction in today's world. It would be immediately shouted down by SJWs, calling it ableist. It's ableist. How dare you?
All right.
Handy capable. They are handy capable, young man. Okay.
Oh boy. I don't know.
So what's going on? What's up?
I was just talking about the election with a bunch of people for a while, and then it like invariably went to, you know, Obama's legacy and the stuff that he wasn't able to accomplish and what a waste it was.
Like such as what? Gun control?
No, I don't think so. I don't think gun control was ever really his platform when he was running, was it?
No.
But part of his platform was reducing the military budget through efficiency, and that seems to have not happened.
Never happened. Yeah, no.
He was supposed to close Guantanamo Bay. He did try to do that. That was actually, I believe, an executive order that he issued his first day in office, but the Democrats actually voted against him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that people talk about how horrible Obamacare is, but I don't know how fair that is because Republicans took over Congress not long after that, and they've perpetually voted to defund it as much as possible.
Oh, you heard what just happened recently, right?
No, I didn't.
They defunded it. They passed the bill through Congress. Now it's going to go to the president's desk, and he's going to have to veto it. He's going to have to use... I don't know how many times Obama's used his presidential veto power, but I don't think it's been any.
Yeah. Vetoes are kind of rare these days because usually presidents like play to the center too much for that to be, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's usually the House or the Senate, one or the other, that really pushes things one way, but it usually doesn't come to the president's desk to be vetoed very often.
Right.
Like, I think you might have seen a veto under Bush when the Democrats had a lock hold, when they had their super majority.
Okay.
But I don't know. It just doesn't come up very much anymore. There used to be a lot more vetoes, I think, because it's an embarrassment for the president.
Right, that's the thing.
To have to veto something, because it makes it look like he doesn't have control of the government.
Right. Exactly.
Which... you know, he isn't supposed to, but I think our modern American sensibilities think of the president as just the guy.
Yeah, he's just the guy, right? He's basically the king. That's what people equate him with, and it's like, that's not what he is at all. Like, it's such an elementary view of U.S. government. Many people in the world think that too. It's not just
Right.
dumb Americans who can't name 4 presidents. That's like a lot of people around the world. Like even people who know better, even people who know that the system's a lot more complex than that. Like my friend Zardoz from the UK, he's like, come on, it's basically just a king. It's just a monarchy. When I like rail against monarchy, he's like kind of defending monarchy in this roundabout way by saying, well, that's all that the president is.
I mean, like, from which angle is he arguing that from? Absolute power or power through heredity?
I don't know. I don't even think he knows.
That's usually the case when people make comments like that, is that they're not even sure what they mean.
Yeah, right, exactly. They're just all they know is that the UK has this history, this strong history of monarchy.
Right.
And you know, they'll jump to defend monarchy even when it doesn't even serve them. They'll jump to defend it. It's like written into their DNA. Like no offense to the Londoners or the citizens of the UK who might be listening to this, but you guys have this weird, I don't know, maybe this is what truly defines or distinguishes Americans from Brits, is that you guys, the Brits, have this like romanticized notion of monarchy that is completely lost on Americans.
Right.
Am I speaking for myself here, or do you feel the same way? Like, I recoil I'm repulsed by the notion of monarchy.
Yeah, but has the UK really had a functional monarchy since, they became a constitutional monarchy?
No, but that doesn't stop them from having this beatified notion, like reminiscing positively about it.
Well, I mean, if we want to try to glamorize the history of continental Europe.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
My favorite Monty Python joke ever is from the Holy Grail, when there's the two serfs working the field and King Arthur like rides away, and one of them is like, he's a nobleman, and the other one's really, how can you tell? And he's like, he hasn't got shit all over him.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's when they were still digging in the mud.
See, the thing is that I think that all monarchies are really just hidden oligarchies, because what king is really going to sit on his throne when the entire noble class is against him?
Right, no, and historically, kings that were in positions like that were assassinated and stuff. There was,
right,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Power struggles.
Right. I mean, that happened more often than not. Because you have to remember, not far under the surface of all these supposed, I don't know. There's this kind of myth that Europeans are just so sophisticated.
Right.
And I don't think that it's true. They're just one layer under the skin. They're still just a bunch of smelly barbarians.
Yeah. No.
Especially France.
Especially France.
Especially France.
Why France? Why are they particularly barbaric?
I mean, that's Charlemagne and the Comitatus and, William the Bastard from Normandy. France, I mean, look at what happened at the end of the French Revolution. Whew. Terrifying stuff.
Just dead bodies everywhere.
Yeah, the French, I don't know. They haven't won much lately, so we kind of ignore them.
Yeah, we do, right? We're just like, oh, they're French. No, it's like, these are some seriously fucking grimy motherfuckers. I remember hearing something a while back stating that the world of mercenaries, of assassins, it has its capital in Paris. Like, worldwide. There are more hitmen and mercenaries for hire residing in France than anywhere else in the world.
I can't say that shocks me necessarily. Although if you had told me Moscow, I probably would have said that I believe that too.
Yeah, right. They're much more likely to like operate internationally in disregard of like, international laws and stuff like that, I would think.
Well, I was just more thinking that Russia's attitude as a country and even just as individual people, they're like very cold and kind of like we're manly men, even still, with Putin's anti-gay
Oh, right.
legislation, etc.
Right.
But, Putin's a weirdo. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I listened to a Rogan podcast earlier with a guy who was one of the Navy SEAL.
Oh, yeah, Willink.
Yeah, I
Jocko
remember.
Willink.
Right, I listened to that. And
Intense
that was
dude.
really interesting. Yeah, definitely. And the thing that I walked away from that with is that I think ISIS made a mistake when they threatened Putin's life last week.
Did they threaten his life?
Yes, they did.
How many people's lives have they threatened? I think they've threatened all.
Yeah, but you see,
all kinds of people.
There's a big difference between Putin and Obama, and that is that Putin doesn't have a bunch of liberals telling him no.
Yeah. No, Putin has oceans of adoring Russian fans. Like he's basically like Tom Cruise meets Obama meets like Justin Bieber in Russia. He's like a sensation.
And so Russia's rules of engagement in the Middle East are a far cry from America's, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, historically, the Russian rules of engagement have been decidedly different from the Allies or the Americans.
Right.
Until you get to Vietnam, and then you have instances with like Operation Phoenix, where we were actively going on the offense to instill fear into the hearts of our enemies, and they did a lot of heinous shit that they probably wouldn't like to admit to.
Right. But I don't think that Putin is going to go out of his way to reduce collateral damage.
Fuck no. Fuck no.
Exactly. So I think that you could see Putin just carpet bombing, whereas the United States couldn't do that.
Right.
Politically.
Right.
It seems like Russia's in this weird geopolitical place where they can almost do what they want as long as it doesn't involve a G8 nation.
Who's in the G8 again? That's the United States, China, Russia,
Japan,
India,
France. Yeah, I think in Germany. Well, I mean, I think that Germany is the biggest economy in Europe, right?
Yes.
By a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, they're running shit over there. They're monsters. Like they're just like that is the center of the locus of control, both economically and I think quasi-militarily, given the fact that Germany has more American bases in it than any other European state, doesn't it?
Yes. Bush was talking about scaling those down, but I don't think it ever actually happened.
You know what's weird about the military? Each of the parties has espoused a desire to want to decrease government spending, right?
Right.
But when it comes to the military, which is orders of magnitude more disproportionately funded, everyone who talks all that shit when they're campaigning, when the rubber hits the road, they do nothing to reduce the size of the military. In fact, it only gets bigger and bigger every year.
That's because I think that they're unaware of certain realities that only come to the president once he's the president.
Right.
And
like
I think
UFOs and shit.
Yeah. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But I kind of mean that I think that United States prosperity, I think that by reducing the military budget, they might lose more revenue than they're saving by losing our stranglehold on cheap resources that our military provides us.
How do they... This is kind of a mystery to me. Like, how does military strength result in economic advantage? Like, this is a great mystery for me, because I served overseas, and having done so, I would think about this sometimes. I would think about Smedley Butler, Marine Corps general, 2-time Medal of Honor winning general, his speech, "War is a Racket," and how he talks about how military power was used only to open markets that were otherwise closed, and so on and so forth, and kind of like serve as an enforcer for economic policy. And I don't see how it connects. Like, it's such a mystery. It's like step 1, get a military. Step 2, invade nations. Step 3, question mark, question mark, question mark. Step 4, profit. Like, how does that work?
Okay. That's actually surprisingly simple. You fund the rebels, stage a coup, and then you get access to the market.
Yeah, but what if they're not susceptible to a coup, a la Japan or a la China? Like,
Well, we didn't. There was a coup in China. It was just like they run. It was the great, the turnaround of their economy towards a more capitalistic type system, right? That's a de facto coup, in my opinion.
I see.
But
when did that happen?
Under Nixon, the open door policy, I believe it was called.
Wait a minute. Nixon opened the Chinese market, or the Chinese market opened to the West? Like, which way did the doors swing? Did they swing inwards or outwards?
They swung inwards because there was these big rules about who they basically internationally carved up China in terms of which countries got access to what.
I see.
Right. I have to reread on that before I talk about it with any kind of confidence, though.
Just as an aside, I'm sorry, just as a post-it note here, I want to talk about the Australia-Chinese-United States dynamic later on. But go ahead. Okay. What were you about to say?
So, let me give you another example. Mm-hmm. What happens every time an oil pipeline is blown up?
Oil company comes in and has it repaired like within a week.
But what happens to the market?
It's open to quote unquote control, right? Like,
well, I mean, it spikes, right? Gas prices.
Right, yeah, it gets more expensive, yeah.
Right, and so that affects the American consumer, which drags down on the economy. Mm-hmm. You might be like, oh well, look at Exxon's making more money, mm-hmm. and it's like, yeah, but everybody else is making less. Right. Because the prices of products have to go up, and it affects margins for everyone.
Right.
So having a strong military force to stop someone from, say, blowing up all these pipelines in Iraq helps us maintain cheap resources.
It's so interesting to look at things from like the financial economic perspective, and you start to see how very little nationalism and religion actually have to do with the big picture.
Yeah. Well, people have been scapegoating religion for a long time. What were the big religious wars of the 20th century again?
Religious wars of the 20th century? You mean like...
Yeah, I'll wait. What were the big religious wars of the 20th century? I'll wait for the long list of nothing.
Yeah, right. There hasn't been, really, right?
Right.
I mean...
People are like, all wars are fought over religion, almost. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, wars have never really been fought over religion. Like, even with Islam, our battle with them now is political. It's about America meddling in their political affairs. It's not really about, these Christians. I mean, radical jihadists might use that as a talking point to get, teenagers in. But that's not really what it's about, is it?
I'm kind of having a revelation right now. Do we live in an anarcho-capitalist world?
I don't think so.
So corporations don't ultimately run things? Corporations don't ultimately dictate things? We don't live in a corporate oligarchy? Some kind of corporate anarchism?
Well, one second, though. Like, anarcho-capitalism, to me, is the economy in the Old West, where there's no control over economics and gold rules the day and all the, you know what I mean? There's no regulation of economy like during the gold rush, right?
Right.
No government involvement whatsoever. People hired their own private police. So,
But then
no,
what you had there was like also the United States government was also fledgling at that time too. Like what I see there is like
well, it's
basically
100 years old or
yeah,
more.
it was, but I mean, it wasn't like fully
Yeah.
developed to the point where even they could be deploying those elements there. You know what I mean? Like situation dictates. If you don't have the infrastructure, they didn't barely had railroads then. In
Well,
order
we had two federal. Well, no, the Transcontinental Railroad was already completed by then.
What year was this? 1870?
I don't
1880?
remember. Like the gold rush though was like most of it was in the post World War II year, or sorry, post Civil War years. 1 second.
Yeah, I mean,
The
Civil War
Gilded
ended
Age.
1863-ish,
18,
1865.
1865. Yeah. 1 second. I'm just looking up when the Transcontinental. Yeah, it was completed in 1869.
Right, that's what I mean. Like, even if it was completed, it was still fledgling. That's what I mean. Like, to say that, we aren't necessarily living in an anarcho-capitalist world, and to equate that with it, I see it. We are living in an anarcho-capitalist world. It's just this is more, more advanced, more developed. That's all. It's been allowed to evolve.
Right.
Think about who dictates foreign policy. I mean, and now it's even more bold-faced because you have Citizens United, which allows private corporations to do whatever the fuck they want in terms of funding presidential candidates. It would seem like, to me at least, that we are living in this world whereby, yeah, we get the lip service of government, and government is kind of the veneer that they sell us this anarcho-capitalism with. Like in actual fact, what's happening is you have corporations behind the scenes that are actually dictating policy and have been doing so since the Banana Wars.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the World Trade Organization is more powerful than the United Nations?
No, I mean but then I'm arguing against myself if I don't agree there, because
Right.
that's what's weird. I don't know. It's hard to tease apart like the confluence of corporatism and government structure. Like they're so intertwined.
Right. Well, I'm thinking about because I'm not really clear at all about the role or the interactions between the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund.
Yeah.
Are you?
No, I think they're both banks, right? One is about one is for communicate. Well, basically, the IMF is for coordinating the exploitation of third world countries that are too poor but are resource rich but are undeveloped, and then the World Trade Organization is to like police trade between countries that are developed.
So let me ask you a question real quick. Because I heard that was vastly overstated and that the main source was a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
I've heard about that book, never read it though. Took it out from
Yeah.
the library twice, never read it.
Yeah, I heard that guy's been somewhat discredited because I heard that he was the main source for that narrative.
Okay.
That like this is what allegedly happened is that corporations would basically convince the I don't remember if it might have been the World Bank or the IMF. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But one of them to loan money to third world countries to put infrastructure in place so that big companies could come in and take out their resources, but that they intentionally made the infrastructure so extensive and egregiously indulgent that the countries had no hopes of being able to pay them back, so that they were forced to make deals where they would get debt forgiveness in exchange for selling the resources at radically reduced prices. That's what I heard. I don't know how true it is, but I've heard it's somewhat BS, but I haven't looked into it.
Well, that's what he advanced in the book, right? Was that
That's what I heard, yes.
Yeah, he was brought in there to like reduce prices to get them to accept a lower price for what in any other developed country they would have got a much more money for. But this happens in microcosm as well. I don't know whether or not what he says, the claims that he made, were valid or invalid or discredited or veracified, but it wouldn't be so hard to accept the fact that someone who releases a book called Memoirs of an Economic Hitman, like, that's so, like, just on its face, I know that he's open to kind of aggrandizing himself, self-aggrandizement, and is like kind of dramatic, and it wouldn't be hard to believe that he's exaggerating some of his claims.
Well, or he just feels really guilty and he's going over the top on self-shaming.
Could be. Yeah, it could be. He's feeling like a lot of economic hitman guilt, which is means that there's still good in the world. So you can rest easy, XJ. There's still good in the world.
Well, if he's an economic hitman, does he live in Paris?
Yeah, right, exactly. He should, right? I think all the economic hitmen live in Manhattan. Pretty sure. Anyway, what did you think of the Willink podcast? What did you think of him as an individual?
He seemed very sincere.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't seem like the typical kind of jarheadish narrative that people associate with military people justifying what they do.
Mm-hmm. I would appreciate it if you didn't use the term jarhead. I am pretty offended by that term.
Are you?
It's a microaggression, and I need to save space now because I'm gonna cry.
Right.
How dare you trigger me like that? No, I don't care.
Yeah, I hear you. So
yeah, he was pretty serious dude. I'll give you a little insight. My first impression of him was seeing an infomercial, clip of an infomercial that he did for his executive training program. And I'll tell you this, my first knee-jerk reaction, I didn't like him. Like, as soon as I saw his face, his boxy face, and heard him talking about training executives, I was immediately turned off. I was like, this guy's fucking bullshit. I don't give a fuck if he's a SEAL. But having listened to the podcast and actually heard him tell his story, yeah, no, I fucking respect the shit out of that motherfucker. He's a badass motherfucker.
And the thing about his whole narrative on Rogan that impressed me was to the lengths that he went to defend moderate Muslims from a perspective of, they were fighting and dying alongside me, etc.
Right.
And I had to build a trust relationship with. You could tell he had like some kind of a personal connection to what he was doing there.
Yeah, it's true.
And a lot of people just assume, especially more liberal people, assume that military people are just all sociopaths who get off on killing, and that's why they side up.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that exists. I would like to think in the wake of these wars and in the wake of like so many Americans actually having joined the military and served in it, that opinion would be changing. But I think it was definitely at its height maybe in the late 80s. That was an era in which the military was like seeing no action. Maybe Grenada, like that was it. And then there was the bombing of the Marine Corps barracks in Lebanon.
We went into Panama too for Noriega
and Panama. But that was it in terms of military action. And people got this really, I guess they were still reeling from. They were still reeling from Vietnam. Maybe Vietnam just was resounding in the zeitgeist.
Well, see that it seems weird to me because I would have thought the height of resentment against military people probably would have come during Vietnam, but then again, most of those people weren't volunteers, so
yeah,
that's probably why that's the case. But that being said, it's just kind of interesting. It was all.
I think it was the draft dodgers maybe who brought that hatred on to the service members, because here they were proving that an alternative to serving in the military, to going along with the draft, was an actual course of action that one could take. And when these soldiers were coming back, having been drafted, even though they knew that they could have just gone across the border to Canada and not served, they still did. So people were, as a result of this, them presenting this legitimate second option and them not taking it, they got angry at them, which is kind of funny when you think about it, like that it wasn't their crimes that they were committing that people were upset about. It was the fact that they chose to go forward and potentially commit those crimes, even though there was this safer, more peaceful alternative lying north of them.
Yeah, but I've never heard that narrative before.
It's kind of an interesting take on it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Thanks a lot, Draft Dodgers, for fucking it up for everybody. You fucking
I think
mates.
I honestly think it was more the stories of women and children getting burned in villages with napalm in Vietnam that probably did it.
Yeah. Yeah, Operation Phoenix, like we were talking about. Like,
right.
There were terrible crimes that were committed. And, I meet very few Vietnam veterans who have much good to say about the war. I meet a lot of people, though. There was a sergeant major that I had who was completely in disbelief was completely rejecting the notion that maybe the United States didn't achieve victory in Vietnam, but maybe we didn't lose in Vietnam, but we certainly didn't achieve victory. And no matter what the officer who was delivering the presentation on the Vietnam War would say about it, like this sergeant major who was basically raised and trained by Vietnam veterans, like these were the people who were his senior officers and senior enlisted, he was totally against this notion. But when you ask people who actually fought in the war, they're much more open to accepting the fact that Vietnam was a failure.
Well, I have to ask a question.
Yeah.
Wasn't the Gulf of Tonkin incident a false flag, verified?
Yeah. But hold on a second. Are you eating right now, XJ?
I was, but I had my mic muted. But you stopped talking. You stopped talking quicker than I thought.
Oh my God! Fucking military discipline being triggered. Please don't do that. Anyway, whatever. Do whatever you want. Fucking, what was your question?
So
Gulf
the Gulf
of Tonkin.
Was that a false flag?
Apparently it was, but now all I can think about is you're eating.
That's some crazy OCD.
Yes, it is.
You need to check your autism.
I think it was. I think it was proven to be a false flag attack, or just some type of event orchestrated in order to catalyze our entering that conflict. But
so that being said, if the incident that got us involved in Vietnam was that, what are the odds that the narrative for what we needed to do there was also bullshit? Why were we in Vietnam, really, is the question I'm asking, because
we were there to pick up the torch from France. That was their colony, and they no longer had control over their indigenous populations in their imperial way, and we were stepping in as the new torchbearer for Western imperialism to control that, under the guise of we were fighting against communism, but it really had nothing to do with that. We've talked about this in podcasts prior, which is that it had nothing to do about stopping communism. It had to do with securing markets, and it had to do with, from the perspective of the Vietnamese, they didn't give a fuck about communism or capitalism. Ho Chi Minh just wanted his country for his people. They just wanted to be left the fuck alone, I guess.
Right. So that being said, did we achieve what we really intended?
Now that the dust is settled, because after we withdrew, they ended up getting into a war with China for some time. It was like a 2-day war or something. I don't know. There was shots fired. It was not a happy-go-lucky relationship between China and Vietnam. And then now, if you look at it, they're basically in the same economic state as China is, which is like it's communism on paper, but when the rubber hits the road, it's capitalist, and ultimately capitalist.
So then, can you say we really lost the Vietnam War?
No.
Huh. That's why I asked, I guess, is because winning depends on the metric for winning, right?
It depends on the metric, and it depends on what your definition of metric is. Like,
right.
Is your definition of metric a McDonald's in Ho Chi Minh City, or fucking what is it, Saigon?
Maybe.
Or is it that they are democratically electing their leaders? That's what's strange. Like, this brand of Chinese capitalism is kind of bizarre, in which you don't elect your leaders, but you have you're free and open market. It's kind of a bizarre hybrid. Maybe it's the future. I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't either.
What do you think the future of economic systems is, particularly in light of the fact that we're going to be looking at like an almost totally automated labor force in the near future? And how do you apprehend abundance, and how does that inform your projected model for future economies?
Well, I mean, it's going to be rough for a while, I think, because we have to get to a point, I think, of where either we can mine asteroids or we're all in the Matrix and we can just infinitely generate whatever we want without it taking up anything but a little space on a hard drive. But there's this sort of middle ground between scarcity and zero scarcity, right?
Right.
And that's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah.
I heard it said that it would take 6 Earths for everybody on the Earth to live at the level of Americans.
Really? Where did you hear that?
I don't remember. It might have been on some UN report.
I don't like these. I get really sick and tired, and I'm the first person to dissent and to say that the emperor has no clothes and kind of shit on American foreign policy and just be really critical of my country. But it pisses me off when, like, it's such a bandwagon thing to just like shit on America, and like to have so many people just like project their own sense of failure and misgivings with the world on us. I think is just, it's shameful on their part, and it's frustrating to have to encounter it so often. And you get it a lot in social justice warriors and, people like that.
I get it the most from people in the UK.
Really?
It might be my person. Oh yeah, big time.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Really? I don't get that.
Oh well, no, that's not true. I get it from Australians a lot too.
Really?
I think that Australia has more in common with the USA than it would like to admit, and they kind of have a Napoleon complex.
Well, they're really rich right now too, so they have that going because they got fat off all that China money. So Australians and Chinese are being able to basically travel the world in luxury right now. They're really enjoying themselves. That said, I should hedge that a little bit in saying that, wages are very high in Australia, but so is the price of goods.
Right. Because there was somebody that I used to talk to who's just going on and on and on about the Aussie minimum wage.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. It's huge.
And I was like, yeah, but you're not really accomplishing that in a vacuum, are you?
Right.
And
No.
so to brag about it on that level is a little bit disingenuous.
Australia, this segues perfectly into the post-it note that I said to keep. So, the United States and Australia have the strongest military alliance that Australia has, like in its country, in its
Right.
country's history. We just recently started to stand up a Marine base in Darwin, which is on the east coast of Australia, in order to reduce forces, I think, projected to reduce forces at Futema Air Base in Okinawa and other places in Okinawa, perhaps. But here's the rub. China just signed a 99-year lease for something like $800 million, which is a pittance when you think about it. But they signed the lease to control the entire Darwin port. What comes in, what goes out, it was purchased and is going to be run by a Chinese company which will probably then subcontract it down. But it represents this huge transfer of wealth from China to Australia. Now, for those who haven't been following the discussion, China has been able to fuel its meteoric rise to economic superpower using not its own resources, because in terms of natural resources, yeah, it does have some, but it's not like amazing.
Yeah, not like Russia.
No. It's been getting those resources almost, I wouldn't say exclusively, but one of its main drug dealers is Australia. And they've been funding a lot of the ores and the rare minerals and all of that. They've been selling all that to China. So Australia's been kind of having its cake and eating it too. They're in a really good position with the United States, and as they're part of the Anglosphere, we also have that kind of connection to them. But they've also been, like with this deal with the Darwin port, like they're basically deeply in bed with the Chinese. And I think is kind of an interesting dynamic.
So how does the U.S. State Department feel about that relationship between Australia and China?
That's a good question. What does that look like? I'm sure, like, if you were to ask the Australians, they'd be like, "Oh, it's just business." But if you were to ask the State Department, they might be like, "Yeah, it's just business. We see nothing wrong with that." Or they might say, it's something that we're kind of looking at and we want to look more into.
See, I would think that they would maybe start to push a narrative of it's against our national security.
Yeah,
for that relationship to exist.
That's the question: is when will that happen? I think as time goes on, eventually that point will be reached, but who's to know when that's going to happen?
Right. I don't know. It's all. I wasn't aware of this port deal until you just told me. So
yeah,
I'm not
no,
sure
it just came across my radar yesterday or day before.
Right.
Pretty huge transfer of wealth, one, but when you think about it in terms of nation states, $1 billion is a pittance.
That's true.
Isn't it? Like, they paid only $800 million in order to lease this port?
Yeah, but I'm more concerned about the minerals and stuff that they're getting, the resources.
Okay. Russia signed another deal where they gave up all kinds of territory in their outback for China to do fracking or something.
Huh. Russia certainly doesn't need money right now. Well, maybe
Why
they're
is that?
starting to because of fracking in the United States.
Yeah, I thought they needed oil to be at $100 a barrel, and because it was plunging, because
Right.
I don't know, we were able to get the Saudis to like drop their price or something.
Yeah, we were very manipulative over the price of oil.
Mm.
We probably have been since the OPEC boycott under Carter
I thought Russia needed oil to be at $100 a barrel
to have their budget
to
met.
have solvency. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's part of our international strategy.
Interesting.
I don't know what I make of Russia still. I don't know if it's just a paper tiger with a big mouth or what. Because I know for, almost certain that their military is infinitely superior or inferior to ours
Yeah.
in the United States. It's like
Yeah.
not even close. I think the United States owns like something like 75% of the world's aircraft carriers.
Yeah. No, in terms of sea superiority, we're it. But then when you think about like the carrier killer missile that the Chinese recently developed, and I'm sure Russians have analogs, what is the point of having an aircraft carrier which basically amounts to just a giant target? Like, if you could shoot a fucking missile from a destroyer, 700 nautical miles away and have it hit its target with 100% lethality, knowing that you're going to sink the carrier, what use is it to have aircraft carriers? They're just giant floating targets, easily destroyed.
Assuming that can actually be done.
It can. The Chinese specifically developed this technology to counter our carriers because
Yeah, but have they tested it against our anti-missile technology?
right. So this is like the cat and mouse game that's being played in.
Well, they can't win. We spend how much more than they do on defense?
It doesn't matter how much you spend. Look at the F-35. We spent untold billions of dollars on that shitbird, and it's the worst. It underperforms the F-15, which was released almost close to 50 years ago now at this point.
Right. Well, we're redoing all our carriers right now, though.
I know that I think they're about to birth one. I think
Yeah,
it's a new one.
I was looking on Wiki a couple of years ago, and I saw that they had plans to release, 6 or 7 new ones and to decommission just as many.
Mm-hmm.
These are ones that take 1/5 the personnel.
Oh, okay.
They're smaller, they're faster, and they're more maneuverable, I guess. But I would imagine that there'd be the latest anti-missile technology, etc.
Right. That it's a question about the missile technology. I mean,
right.
How are you going? Look at it this way: if you shoot, you're China, you shoot 4 missiles. Each of those 4 missiles contain warheads that have within them, 5 or 6, 7 different warheads, and one of them is the real one of them's a dummy one. How do you destroy that many targets? Like, you'd have to destroy it before it's separated, right? Before
maybe. I'm not sure how good our anti-missile technology is at this point, but I know that Putin almost lost his ship when we were trying to put a missile shield in Poland.
Mm-hmm.
And if Putin's like doing that, and that leads me to believe that it may be better than
we're letting on,
or may realize. Yeah,
people. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure it's very good advanced technology. We deployed it. A more scaled down version of it in Israel. That's what the Iron Dome is. That's an American military technology.
What's the range on the anti-carrier?
The anti-carrier missile?
Right.
I don't know. You have to look it up.
Okay, so let me ask you this. First of all, how is China targeting the carrier? And what are our stealth radar blocking capabilities at this point? What's our ability to create a radius of naval superiority around the carriers?
Mm-hmm.
See, my suspicion is that we'd just send in our destroyers and other warships to clean out all the Chinese ones, and then we'd park the aircraft carriers off the coast, and then we'd launch, 35,000 cruise missiles a week. And that their sinking thing won't even matter.
Carrier killer missile. China, India, Pakistan, and Iran all have this system. It was developed from the submarine launched, which makes it even more difficult to deal with. Submarine launched. It's called the Dongfeng. I love how they call them dongs. It's known as East Wind. It's a two-stage solid fuel rocket, single warhead, medium-range ballistic missile (MRBM) in the Dongfeng series, developed by China's Chongfeng Mechanics and Electronics. Blah blah blah. Started in the late 1960s. This program, it was developed from the submarine launch. Now, the anti-ship ballistic missile has a maximum range exceeding 1,450 kilometers. That's 900 miles. Okay?
Yeah. But they have to know where a carrier was in the first place to launch that, right?
If it has passive guidance on it, you could shoot it into the general area and it could paint the target and then hone in on it. Or you would fly a drone. Right. How many drones, and you could have develop redundancies and just fly them out. I mean, I like to say, before we talk too much more about this stuff, I hate people who talk about this stuff. I don't like it when people sit back like we're doing now and we're like kind of like wargaming. Like it's dangerous to talk about this shit.
Right.
And I don't like that it serves as like kind of like a potentiating function for war and conflict. Like what we should be discussing is how can the United States and China go on and continue to coexist? Like that's really what's important. Military technology is for fetishists and otakus, and I fucking hate military otakus.
I guess I'm just skeptical that with the amount of money we spend on R&D in the military that we don't have countermeasures for something as obvious as that.
I'm sure there are countermeasures, but I mean, and the carriers themselves are not really the most important component within the fleet. And I could get into more specifics on that. I could talk to you about it offline. I'm not going to put it out over the broadcast, but whoever needs to know about it could know about it. But there's an even more important component to our fleet than just an aircraft carrier. The carriers get the most attention because they're like the most sophisticated or whatever, but there are more important links in the chain.
I guess our solution would just be to put longer range missiles on the carrier.
I don't know what I think the objective is to just have a bunch of literal faster, more maneuverable ships with more advanced countermeasures that are more automated and have less of a human element there, and like drone swarms and stuff.
Right, that's what I was saying, though. It's like our new carriers only, like, I think the old ones are something like 2,000 people a ship, and the new ones are only 400.
Yeah.
And they're smaller in size. I think the old ones are called Nimitz class or something. I don't remember.
Okay. I'm not too familiar on.
Yeah, I'm not either. I'm not a military buff.
You're not a Navy guy.
No.
Yeah.
I'm not a military guy in general. At least not in that sense.
Yeah. So there's that.
Right.
What else is going on in the news? I mean, what did you want to talk about? Because there's the San Bernardino thing that we could get to, but I don't know. Maybe it's too soon.
I just think that it's more of the same, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really find it shocking anymore to take that for what it's worth.
The fact that it has become the same, that we can refer to it as that, is shocking.
Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that it didn't come to this way sooner than it did.
In terms of just mass shootings everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, with the access that people have had to weapons. So it's not the weapons, right? I think that it clearly can't be the weapons because these weapons have been around for a long time.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
going everywhere.
how long is the public? I mean, the public used to have access to way more deadly weapons than that.
Right.
I don't know. I just don't. I'm so sick of the whole gun control argument because it's
Well, what's causing it?
ideological. Some people are ideologically opposed to guns, and they allow that to suspend their reason.
I mean, what's causing the shooting?
Oh, the shootings. You know, I used to think it was mental disorder and stuff like that, but I now just think it's the zeitgeist. I think it's just this self-perpetuating snowball. It's out there, so it's become its own thing. And yeah, there's a long time between Columbine and the next shooting, right?
Right.
The next major one. I don't know. See, I read this article just yesterday that was saying that mental illness is a bad scapegoat. But he's implying that, you know, identity issues aren't a mental disorder on some level.
But they are.
I mean, that's kind of the point.
Right.
Is that even jihadists have identity issues? They're grabbing onto some group thing and taking that on instead of their own real self-interest.
Right.
And so, insofar as that's true, I kind of thought the guy was a little bit full of crap.
Yeah, that's kind of BS when you really think about it. I mean, these are inherently identity issues. I mean, to say that it's not, everything is a fucking identity issue. I can make the case for anything being an identity issue.
Well, I think his point, though, is that he didn't want mentally ill people being stigmatized.
That's exactly what he wanted to do. Right.
Right. And, I mean, I get that. But at the same time...
That's not the argument to make, though.
Well, yeah, because it's like the whole, you know, not all Muslims are terrorists, not all terrorists are Muslim.
Right.
Type of a thing, which I don't think is very helpful. I don't think that anybody just thought that everybody with a mental illness was shooting everything up. Now, I've heard a lot about the role of SSRIs, but from my research, it seems to be more of a Facebook meme than actual fact.
Okay, so with the SSRIs, I haven't done the research or the diligence, so I don't know, but just wave tops here. Apparently, the vast majority of the shooters, typically the white male shooters, were prescribed SSRIs at some point. And
but given the... All right, so let me make an argument that Penn Jillette made then. After what was it, Sandy Hook? People were like, he was on The View. And of course, you know how that probably went. And she was like, it's these violent video games, yada, yada, yada. He played Call of Duty. And Penn's like, he goes, of course he played Call of Duty. Every male his age plays Call of Duty.
Right.
And it's like, with how overprescribed SSRIs are, it's a pretty big stretch to, like, command a causal relationship, right?
Yeah, it's just a factor. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the factor. And that's the problem with people. They want one original cause. You know, they want it cut up, cookie cutter, but it's not. That's not the way the world works, people. It's complex.
I was disappointed because I think Joe Rogan's tried to make that point too. That SSRIs like allow people to become cold killers? Because like I've heard him say that.
Well, if you don't have a physician like keeping track of you, he's also said that SSRIs have done wonders for people too. So he's not entirely on the side of they're terrible.
Well, no, but that's not what I'm saying. No, I just think that the problem with that is it's a non sequitur. It doesn't logically follow. Because if they make you emotionally numb, then you're not going to be angry enough or have enough energy to even bother going to plan to shoot people.
Yeah, but this is it. It's not when you're on them. It's when you go off them. That's why the FDA had to rewrite the warnings for the side effects, because there was this rash of people who were prescribed SSRIs who were fucking heroing themselves.
Right, but suicide is a far cry from mass murder.
Right, but I mean, some of these mass murders have resulted in suicide as well. There were murder homicides. So it's
that's true. Or murder suicide, you mean?
Murder suicide.
Right. I get what you're saying with that.
I don't know. I don't think it's the SSRIs.
I don't either.
It's you can't hang the entire thing on one variable. Like there are so many different factors involved in this, and this latest shooting had nothing to do with SSRIs. Presumably, this had to do with radicalized Muslim who went to Saudi Arabia recently. Go figure, and his presumably radicalized wife, who he bought via mail order Saudi Arabian bride website.
Oh. Interesting. Maybe she pushed him into it.
Right. I mean, I don't know. There's something there.
That being said, though, man, maybe we should force people to go through some kind of screening before re-entering when they go to the Middle East for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
That's profiling.
Okay, Donald Trump. Like,
Did Trump say that? That seems way too sane for Trump to say.
If you said that to Trump as an idea, he'd be like, "Yeah, it sounds like a pretty reasonable idea. It's a good idea." I mean, we can't necessarily
he'd be
detain
like, "That's
people.
far more moderate than my actual position."
Yeah, right.
Which is, once you leave, you may never return.
Yeah, right. We're just gonna build a wall around the Middle East. That's Donald Trump's new foreign policy plan.
The dome.
Yeah, we're gonna build a dome around the Middle East.
Some people are really convinced that Trump is going to win the general election.
They are, and it's frightening to see how many people actually support him. And I mean, fascism. I don't know.
I think they seriously underestimate what a fucking political destroyer Hillary Clinton is, and what a masterclass politician she is. Nothing sticks to her ever.
Yeah, it's fucking weird, right? With the whole Benghazi thing. I want to get into this.
Matrix.
Yeah, she is. She is. She's the Ma in the Matrix. She is the Matrix.
The Matrix.
Yeah. That concludes our program for today. You got any final points? That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Tour de force.
Yeah, it was interesting. I learned a lot. Actually, a lot more than I have in the previous podcasts, I think.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So did I actually. I learned some stuff too.
Right. I had no idea about the Australia thing or some of the other stuff that we talked about. On top of that, though, like, we should get into that big secret trade deal between all those countries that Hillary Clinton backed.
TPP, TTIP.
Yeah, that's definitely something we should discuss.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Let's do that for the next one. If you were educated or entertained by this podcast, click the PayPal link now and donate. We are run 100% by user-listener donations. We would really appreciate it. I want to thank XJ, my co-host, for stupendous another foreign policy tour de force. And we look forward to the next one, where we will be discussing... What are we discussing in the next one?
The trade agreement?
The trade agreement.
Something about TP for my bunghole. I don't know.
And hopefully we'll have more information on the difference between the IMF and the WTO, so we don't sound like two uneducated morons.
And the World Bank.
But that's why you love us. Yes, the World Bank as well. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll catch you next time. Thank you, Zanish.